boo.
Why are your jingles
exactly
awful?
the opposite.
Was even the same keys? I think you were off.
No, I'm pretty sure it was the same.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sleeping in this stranger's bed. Gonna take a dump. I'm in the commando too. Really, when you're
the buff, you mean?
No, when you really think about it.
Commando is not the way you describe that when you're fully nude.
Think about this. Hang on, though.
Commando typically.
Well, okay, I'm wearing a jacket, but in theory, if I took off the jacket, wouldn't I be technically nude? Because I don't think I got anything down there anymore.
I'm pretty sure you have a shirt on.
Or is that just part of me? Is that an augmented shirt?
I don't know.
Is that just like my new skin? I had a topic that I was going to get into, except I wanted to give us proper time. And now the context is gone, so the segue is going to seem forced. But, regardless, I watched a video about, of all things, the Yakuza in Japan.
Oh, yeah.
And how, because it isn't strictly about them. It's sort of this is why I wanted to separate it into another video, because I feel like it'll lead to a broader philosophical discussion. Is she throwing up, or... The way she's
leaning provocatively.
Well, because, that was awfully, that looked... Okay, see, that's a slightly more conservative lean. That looked like she was seriously having a hurl over the edge. I think it's interesting because the video basically talked about how since the 90s, the Japanese government has cracked down on, the organized crime and all of that. And as a result that no one really would have expected, the violent gang sort of street violence has gone up as a result of that.
Is that just because intensity?
Well, no, it actually. This is, of course, there's going to be numerous factors. Did I miss something on this computer? Because the game's not telling me to go anywhere yet.
Got to look whoremongering in the eye.
Well, this was why I got into this, because this looks like it's some kind of gang triad thing going on here with this father-son dynamic. There's more evidence here.
Whoremongering by order of the Peaky Blinders.
Well, that was going to come into it too. See, I had a whole full circle coming up here. Once we look around for anything suspicious, but I was told to meet him at the bar, and then I have evidence that he's in a gang or something. Could you mute that next time?
It's not really.
I bet you that showed up. I'm gonna crank the mic so that everyone can hear that. I don't get why you would have the. The keyboard clicks on a tablet.
It's a non-option on the new ones, which is annoying.
Well, that's another reason to swear off Apple forever.
Well, that's true.
Not even that the keyboard clicks isn't. It's the precedent of it, is what I mean.
Well,
I'm throwing your fridge because I can, and because he's potential Yakuza? What? I don't know. I'm just making a statement. I don't like fridges.
All right. So what about
but it was
Yakuza?
interesting because essentially the argument that was being made was it was you could argue it was a sort of necessary evil. The guy in the video didn't exactly make this claim because he was trying to be very, apolitical about it. But I sort of got it. The argument certainly could be made based on the things he was saying that you could sort of defend it as a necessary evil kind of thing, because obviously, and it's unique because unlike the mafia in the U.S., because the U.S. is so large and there were multiple different families, you had a lot of violence between them. Right. But the Yakuza, it's like Japan's only as big as the average state, so it'd be basically one mafia family, is basically what the Yakuza is. So they had pretty much total control, and thus rival violence didn't hardly happen. And so, yes, there was crime, obviously, because they were the ones breaking the law, but they were the only ones breaking the law. And it was a little bit of a, the devil that kind of a thing, where it's like, yeah, we know. Yeah, that's me, I'm dishonest. And a dishonest man you can always trust to be dishonest.
Well, it's certainly if they know about it, then they're far more comfortable to
really
just let it be.
This was the thing I had a baseball bat in the corner? How is this evidence?
That's what I'm thinking. but I'm not sure it could inflict the type of...
So hang on, I found a bat that had no visible signs.
And it inflicted lacerations? I think not. Blunt force trauma, maybe.
Well, does lacerations only mean cuts, or is it a broader medical term?
No, lacerations means cuts. That's
Exclusively?
what it is. I'm fairly confident, yes.
Oh, okay, then I'm not. Maybe they're just dumb. But that's hard. I don't think a court would accept that. We found this knife. Did it have blood on it? No. Did it look like it had been touched at all? No. He must have cleaned it.
It was sitting in a corner.
Why is there more? Every time I leave, it keeps telling me to come back. We know his dad doesn't like that he sleeps around, and he's part of a gang, and he beats people with bats, except they're clean. And
Clean bats.
what else? He had an answering machine that he's going to meet someone at the bar. Is this criminal activity worth prosecuting independently? I don't think so. What
bat
else
thing,
do I
maybe.
have to search?
He owns a bat. Lock him up.
I mean, the argument, I suppose, could be that it didn't look like it. If it's a baseball bat and it doesn't look like it's ever been used for sports, then maybe you could argue that it was. But even then, that seems flimsy.
It's more than flimsy. That's called circumstantial.
I don't know what else to search here, guys. I've been on his computer. I've been everywhere.
How does that relate to...
Well, I thought it was interesting because it's a sort of... It opens the question of... Because the thing that made me wonder this rabbit trail is there's really only 3 possible relationships a society can have with crime. You can have the sort of idyllic no crime, which is kind of impossible. And that only leaves the 2 alternatives being organized crime or disorganized crime. And I suppose if you had to choose, you probably would rather go with organized crime, wouldn't you?
Well,
because then you would at least know who they were. You would know
there's rules. I mean,
yeah, there's a slight degree of like a code. And because essentially what he was saying is that the Yakuza, to get to the specific example, it's like the Yakuza obviously kicked anyone who started causing trouble off of their turf because that was, they had to maintain their own business. And as a result, petty individual crime that is usually driven by impulse and often has more tendency to get violent was curbed. And as a result, the only crime that existed was the sort of underhanded, fairly tight-laced crime that you can obviously not necessarily excuse, but that you could count on, I guess, in a way. It wasn't disruptive.
It's predictable.
Yeah. Whereas, random kids, robbing stores or whatever gang violence can arise on the petty levels, that kind of stuff didn't happen. And so I just thought that was interesting because it made me the question that I would like to pose, if I have to pose it in a single question, would be, can something that you would describe as a necessary evil still be called evil if it's necessary? Because that raises the question. It's like, if it can't be escaped, if it's just the nature of life, if it can't be avoided, then can it really be classified as evil?
Well,
or is it just an unpalatable aspect of life?
Yeah, I think the reason we call it evil is because it's probably morally
unfavorable,
uncomfortable, or
well, because the idea is you can't prevent everyone from doing crime, so you would at least want the people who will do crime decently,
right?
And this is where the Peaky Blinders thing came in, because there was in I forget which episode, one we watched last week. When he's talking to the guy who runs their bar, he says, "You're bad men, but you are bad men." It's kind of like, that's the best kind of scenario. It'd be like, yeah, we know that you do shady stuff, but we also know you got our back. You're on our side.
Yeah. Well,
it's like that. You'd rather that than
that I feel like is fair. It's not. Yeah. It's like, yeah, they definitely will do anything to get in their way, but at the same time, they're typically fair. Like, if they come in and they push you out of your own bar, they're gonna at least pay you. They're not just gonna be like, forget you, unless you cross them or decide not to.
Yeah.
Then it's like, okay, well, yeah, now there's no. Sorry, we're not asking.
So yeah, this was a random. I mean, I guess since we like our morally gray topics, this was
It reminds me a bit of a psychological topic.
I was going to get into a psychological aspect.
It's the concept of, I think they describe this within children, which is...
this towel's perfectly clean. He must have used it to wipe up blood and then laundered it. What else do you need me to find, game?
Look in his toilet.
He doesn't use this toilet. He must be a robot who doesn't actually need to poop. This toilet paper's too small. He's a midget. Seriously.
It's a graph that I can't remember what all was in the graph, but I think it's like
he's got some strong
organized
graphs.
or ordered. It's like deviance or rebellion versus ordered obedience, and then it's like disorganized or
a broken clock, and this is evidence.
With Evelyn's TOD.
That's what it is.
Okay, that's better. If they're saying that the time lines up, that's. I mean, we're talking
it's the whole
paperback noir story, but sure.
It's the whole chaotic good versus chaotic evil, and then chaotic
lawful good versus lawful.
Yeah, it's that whole concept.
Yeah.
Find anything else in here.
And
Please tell me that's. Oh, thank goodness I can get out of here.
It's certainly. I mean, it reminds me a bit of like during the times of conquest in seafaring and that kind of thing, pirates and those types of things.
I left just in time.
They literally.
Are you freaking serious? I literally just walked past them going, yeah, man, I heard gunshots from inside there. You better check it out.
That's the only apartment down there. Yeah, I know.
If you, what is it? There are 2 men tied up in my room. If you go now,
I'll
you might
look into it. No, I certainly think that it's true that having some sort of knowledge of what people are doing is more helpful than.
Well, and I think it ultimately comes down to the
do.
practicality of saying, can you reasonably expect to live in a crime-free society? Because that's a pipe dream, effectively. You can't really expect that you'll ever achieve that. So your only goal then is just to live in as minimal crime as possible. But the more you repress it, the more it breeds in, the dark corners where you can't see it.
I think it's actually Ayn Rand that says poverty is the mother of crime.
I don't necessarily think that's the case, but maybe.
I can't remember. I know it's
Who's
a philosopher,
alarmed?
but
Whoa, your coat rocks, bro. I mean, yeah, I'm not. You're a hobo. You are the most stylishly dressed hobo I have ever seen. The future must be good. For the hobos to find Coco Chanel boots and Hugo Boss fur coats.
No, those are custom sealed baby leather boots.
Doc Martens. He's been
Pretty sure Doc Marten uses seal leather, right?
He's been scavenging in the really nice dumpsters.
No, maybe it wasn't Ayn Rand, but I know it was a philosopher that basically, had that sentiment. So.
Well, sure. But what was the sentiment in aid of?
What?
I got thrown off by the stylish hobo.
Okay.
I'm now looking for the bar. Well, so you brought that up to emphasize what?
Well, I mean,
you don't know what your point was?
no, I mean, I'm not remembering what we were talking about because we shifted topics. So
no, we didn't. We're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking about.
You were talking about poverty being the root of crime, but we were talking about how you'll never be able to live in non-crime.
Because
so then your only options are organized versus unorganized, and at least the organized can be reckoned with.
And the reason being, and I'm not. This is going to come off sounding awfully Marxist. So just
that's interesting.
Just play with me for a second. I think the reality is, obviously,
organized crime doesn't necessarily
Marxism
start in poverty, though.
No, certainly it doesn't. What I'm saying is crime as a whole is typically birthed out of need or necessity most of the time.
Petty crime, maybe, but organized crime is...
It's still it's about
accumulation, but it's not
power when you feel like you have none.
That's not. But power, but feeling like you have no power, does not equate to poverty, because you can feel like that and be reasonably well off.
Well,
and I mean, most white collar crime is not done. I mean, that's why it's called white collar crime. It's because it's done by people who don't do it because they need the money.
My point is, in a society that the reason that I think socialism and communism and Marxism, that kind of thing, they don't work, is because the reality is there is no utopian version of life in which everyone can have the same.
Thomas More was really quite naive.
Well, certainly, but I'm just saying in that
Thomas
context.
More, I believe it's Thomas More. No, I'm wrong. It's something else more.
I think it is Thomas More. I thought it was Thomas More.
Maybe it is. I know that I'm currently reading Thomas Paine, so I feel like I'm confusing the two. I thought maybe it is Thomas More.
Paine is the one that I was reading the pamphlets of, right? The one that...
Were you? You never brought it up to me.
Yeah, did we talk? We had a whole discussion about this. About
when?
I was talking about his... Because we talked about him potentially... I initially made the statement, and I was incorrect about this, that he was one of the signers of the Declaration, which he wasn't. But...
I don't remember that either.
Yeah. I came to find that out later.
Maybe it was... Yeah, either way, I think he was wrong.
But the principle of expecting that people are going to have sameness is what causes there to be such power differential. Well, because you have to buy into the naive notion that all crime is... Well, not even all crime, but that all human vice is purely circumstantial. That people only do bad things because of circumstances around them, and if circumstances were better, they wouldn't. And that's just very naive. Well, exactly. And that obviously is echoed by Jordan Peterson when he basically says, if you think that this kind of thing works when people have this kind of authority and power, and you have some sort of, what is it called? Monopoly on perfect morality, which you don't.
Well,
it's like...
Well, and I was going to get into the psychological element from a different perspective, because it's very much the same thing Jordan Peterson talks about in saying that if you think that you're free of any kind of malevolence, you are the most dangerous, because that is where you will be completely not on your guard.
Right.
Thus, it's like you have to integrate it deliberately.
Well, yeah.
Which is where, again, you come on a if you consider that a microcosm, you expand that out and go, in a society, you're going to have to integrate your seedier elements, which means you'd be better off having a gang that you know who can be reasoned with, at least, whose methods you're familiar with, and perhaps you can attempt to control as best as you can, rather than this notion that you'll eradicate it completely and then it just is left to disperse into the shadows where no one's overseeing it.
If I could be so bold, organized crime and terrorism have only chaos and order in difference. Like, the idea of terrorism is because because
terrorism is by definition ideologically motivated.
Yes, but I'm saying
otherwise it would just be violent crime for no reason.
But that
terrorism
that would be 100%. If I came through a city with a huge group and we just decimated a city for no apparent reason and there was no ideological underpinning, that would 100% be classified as a terrorist attack
by the populace. But I think that would be a misuse of the term, because terrorism is generally the threat of violence to enact some kind of social or political goal. If you have no goal, you would just... what would be? You'd be a mass murderer at that point.
It's the whole... Some people
like serial
just
killers,
watch the world burn.
Well, yeah, it's like serial killers aren't always necessarily terrorists.
Well, that's true, I suppose.
Because sometimes they're doing it for literally no reason, at which point you just call them psychos or serial murderers or whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, the whole Unabomber thing, that's a domestic terrorist because of the fact that he was doing it specifically to promote his ideological message. Whereas...
Which makes technically a terrorist.
Oh, absolutely is. But it's like that. Ted Bundy wasn't a terrorist, he was just a murderer.
Right, no, I agree. Falsify. Yep,
we're standing strong. I have no clue what we're talking about. If not to cover it. So yeah, that just was where I thought about it. You're going, if you think that you could eradicate it, it's like thinking you can eradicate your own dark sort of impulse, and the reality is the best you can do is learn to channel it into the right sort of avenues where it doesn't cause undue harm. It's essentially the idea that you're effectively creating as much order out of the inevitable chaos of crime, but you're still ordering it as much as it can be ordered.
Right.
Which is why, in the modern day, like, most mafia businesses now, the reason the mafia is no longer really a thing is because they're all running legitimate businesses. Because they basically wised up and went, okay, we're already putting in all this work. If we can just get the cops off our back by making sure we're above board, then they all just become businesses at that point.
Yeah. Which there are certainly industries that you would argue have criminal tactics, I suppose. Like, for instance...
but you could argue there's a certain degree of cutthroat, not exactly criminality, but certainly aggression
within
in super high success businesses.
Right, that's what I mean.
I don't know what happened.
Drinking heavily prior to the accident. And the reason Evelyn...
I hope all of these statements were true. I hope I didn't have to pick one that was correct, because I don't know what's correct.
Now, if the evidence doesn't fit and your story was a lie, then how...
I don't know. What were you saying?
Sorry, I was actually reading what was going on there.
Yeah, don't bother. We're too far gone.
But no, I think that it
was the antique clock.
If you don't...
By hitting her in the head with that antique clock, you so
I'm thinking of the specific martial artist, the famous guy, the Wilson is his last name.
Wilson.
Yeah, the cave of.
I don't know his name. I know the channel. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, he does this whole concept about shadow integration, where he talks about the idea of if you don't look at that in the face as a man, specifically.
Jordan Peterson talks about it too.
Then you can't. If you don't know what you're capable of as far as violence, you're never going to be able to then protect yourself against it. You know, it's like.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially you gotta know. You have to be. It's the quote we mentioned a long time back. If you're. Oh, what was it? Because I love the way it's worded. You can't call yourself peaceful unless you're capable of great violence. Because if you're incapable of violence, you're not peaceful, you're harmless.
Right.
And I believe Malcolm X put it once by saying, in order to lay your guns down, you must have first picked them up.
Right.
It's like, you can't claim to be, I'm choosing to be the bigger man, I'm choosing to take the high road, I'm choosing to be peaceful, unless you have the capacity to do the otherwise.
Right.
If that's the only thing you're capable of doing, then it's very similar to the whole Nietzschean concept that most people aren't good, they're just cowards. Who can't abide the consequences of doing bad.
Which I've actually made the statement before. How many people actually are far more malevolent than we even recognize in our society?
Well,
and yet people just don't have the means.
Well, because that's generally the people who are the most normal seeming. In fact, the most unassuming, I should say.
Which is interesting because that's essentially the platform that social media has provided for people.
Oh, have you heard Jordan Peterson talk about Tinder? It's actually quite frightening.
Oh, yeah. Jordan Peterson's on something of a rant right now.
He actually makes the case for going, we're essentially incentivizing narcissism.
Well, that's
because it creates this idea that you go, I can just get what I want out of this, and then I'll leave and never speak to you again.
No one gives a frick about your head.
And the people who succeed at that are the people who don't care about other people, and then he also says, you'd think, it's just the people who are already like that excel. No. It's the fact that you become like that in order to excel, and then you do that 5 times, and then you don't care anymore.
Right.
You can easily become a narcissist.
100%. Well, and I think the reality is that is at the core of really any... That potential is at the core of any human being.
And if you don't recognize it, it's... Yeah. You will stumble upon it.
Yeah, you will. You probably, if you don't recognize it, it's probably because you're already narcissist.
It will recognize you. So, anyways, that's my point. It seems like a ridiculous notion to be like, we should bring back organized crime, because that's not the solution, I don't think. But I'm not sure that there is a solution. Ugh, that was a strange sound.
I don't think there is a solution.
Alrighty, I walk away from him. Whoa, she wants to kiss me. I told you she was hotting up. She's all upon.
She's gonna tell you about those pockets soon.
I know you've always wondered what they do. I got another upgrade point. What should I spend it on?
Pockets.
That's true. I don't have any pockets in my augments.
You need some pockets.
I need a kangaroo pocket. Right in the middle. What would you put in your augmented kangaroo pocket?
I don't know. Probably snacks.
Put some hot pockets in
I was about to say, probably some food.
Put a hot pocket inside a hot pocket. Not the hot pocket.
I'm going to go stick my hand in the microwave. Hot pocket! Yeah, it certainly is. I obviously my family has history in it, so I'm not gonna.
Well, now you can't just go saying
Sure,
that. You got
I
to back
can.
that up now.
I gotta back it up with what? My grandpa made us change our name a long time ago because there was some things. He was a part of the German mob, and it was not good.
You never hear about the German mob.
And
well, unless the history books might consider it differently depending on how you look at it, depending on how sharp your tinfoil hat is. Maybe no one. Maybe that's all people talk about is the German mob.
yeah, exactly. No, but in all reality, coming away from the Second World War, I mean, there's only so much a skill set. My grandfather was high up in I can't remember what rank as far as the military, but at that point, when you have that kind of training and knowledge on an intelligence level, like meaning gathering intelligence, not just IQ. But there's not much you can do with that on a civilian level when you get back.
Well, it would be just security it would be private security.
Well, you either
point.
have the option of going either CI like
or
a Fed,
private eye.
I suppose
That would be fun, except they don't make much money.
Anyway, but he chose the mafia, so there we go.
And now it raises the question: why is it that? Why is Peaky Blinders a thing? Why do people like watching it?
Because
on some fundamental level, you think like.
I would argue it's majority.
Maybe everyone already knows that
its viewership is probably majority men, and that may be sexist
I'm willing
of me.
I'm pretty confident that's just demographically.
But I think that part of it is the reason. In the same way that like Bond became so popular, it's
a bit of a but Bond. They would argue Bond's popular because of a male power fantasy, and
but that's not
I think
people
that's
that argue
that's typecasting,
stupid.
yes, but I think there's an element of truth in it. This was way
a slim
too much.
element of truth. I think if you're watching Bond for that, you're already a pig. I'm sorry, you know what I mean?
Well, if you see it as nothing but that, then yeah.
Because my point is, the reason I like Peaky Blinders or Bond or something like that is because it's a men exercising ultimately such self-control and composure and given dangerous situations that it's just like, yeah, this guy has brass the size of Texas.
I think to parrot Jordan Peterson's line, it's not raw power, it's competence.
Right. That's
and I think there's something that people find alluring in that on a character level, but also on a sort of like aspirational level. This is rough. I don't think I'm gonna make it in 2 seconds. Oh, I had to do both.
No,
I thought maybe it was one or the other. This is hard. How is this my level? This seems like it's beyond me right now. Did I level up yet? Maybe I didn't choose. Now I know what I need to choose. Where's my skill tree? I know where I'm putting me praxis. Alright, I want all of the stealth. 45% is actually still not that great. But it might help enough. Because I think but then there's also, I guess, some of it has to be a power element to be like, wouldn't it be cool if you could walk down the street and have everyone be like, oh, okay, I'm going to...
See, it's not that. That's not the thing for me. It's being able to literally look danger and... threat. I think threat is a better word.
Yeah, but that you could arguably do that.
People are pointing guns at him. He's just like,
yeah, but that's just cool that's just cool under pressure, which you can cultivate in any context.
It's true, and I think you should.
But I think there's an element of the. Okay, I triggered it right immediately. This isn't going to work. It doesn't cost me an attempt if I just give up. I don't think they thought that through. As long as I give up, the computer doesn't bother. Because I think there's an element of the coolness of it that is the control of the situation. Because you can be cool under pressure, and then you just be the guy that got shot. Like, you could be the guy that got shot and at least, died...
with their boots on.
Yeah, but that wouldn't be nearly as impressive. No one would watch that as
right.
cathartically. Whereas there's the element of control that's like,
Well, I think
I'm
there's
holding
also,
the cards here. Oh no, that
I
did
think
cost
the
me.
reason why I like Peaky Blinders specifically is because it's well balanced. There are certain times where you get those kinds of narratives where it's like, he's so bad, no one can touch him. It's like, no,
Yeah,
that's
no, they
not...
definitely show the what?
Like, the bottom line is there are other bad men that are also not to be messed with, and he's gonna mess with them, and then he's gonna pay for it.
Yeah, but he's gonna get up.
Yeah.
I don't know. Because again, it's a similar deal with to bring it back. Where do you think I'm gonna go? Take a wild guess.
I think we're gonna go to arcade.
Because you can't help but argue that that's another aspect of Silco's character that's interesting, is the sort of mobster attitude.
Yeah.
That's like, okay, this is most certainly a dude you don't want to mess with.
Yeah.
And I think every dude wants to be the dude that no one wants to mess with.
Well, it's
at least subconsciously.
It's a bit of the
this is hard, man.
Kind of thing where
this
it's
is
like
awful.
The Jordan Peterson would argue that the reason that something like Beauty and the Beast is such a draw is because women go, I actually want to be able to tame or to
that's
somehow
the quintessential
some sort of monster.
Pulp story for women is that kind of. Well,
but
here's a movie that I don't think would ever get made is Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. I think today that would be a very anti-feminist and no one would like it. Not no one would like it, but rather it would be opposed critically. Because it's like, I feel like any man who's ever watched it and any woman who's ever watched it totally agrees with it. Because you're just like, yeah, this is kind of how it is. Men are going to be, if left to their own devices, they would be sort of a step above just wild animals. And yet, it's the fact that, there is a sense of propriety that
women
can enforce, because essentially it's the idea that, we're getting close now. The question is, do I fortify my trail and risk exposure, or do I make slightly more progress? We're very close. I think I'm going to fortify my trail. Okay, well, we got... Oh, boy. I think we might... Wow, that goes fast. Yikes. Come on, give me my stuff. Why is that one so slow? It might still happen. This one's a 5? This is not a level 3 terminal. You cannot tell me this is a level 3. I leveled up my stuff and this is not a level 3. What on earth? This is the worst terminal ever. And we got super close that time. I'm just saying, I think that that's an element of it. And I forgot, how did we get into that? We were talking about Arcane in a second. I have no clue I made that jump. I know how I know why I brought you're talking about the you brought the Beauty and the Beast. That was the connection.
Right. Well, and again, that notion that...
Well, because it's the idea that you gotta... If you're gonna protect people, you have to be able to harm other people. That's a fact. And
they're willing to harm.
But,
yes.
and the question then is, you just have to... You have to have the competence to know where those lines are.
Which, again, comes back to necessary evil, and at that point, is it really evil? Is it evil for me
that's
to
the crux
take
of
out
it.
a
Can necessary... And I think this is where I think you could really broaden this as wide as you want to take it, is the only answer I think that can be had for that. We're going to do it again. Okay, well, now we know it didn't work last time, so we're just going to have to do it this way this time. Wow! What? Oh. I think that means it was about to be activated. I think that was a bonus thing. Alright, well, we're close enough. I'm going to fortify like Fort Knox up in here. That's going to take ages to do it, so I'm going to fortify everything else. No, come on, work with me. What? Okay, that didn't take nearly as long. That was a level 5.
All right, Malik.
Boom, we did it.
We finally got it.
Yikes, that was rough.
Why did you need to do that?
We did this because she wants to do something petty. And we'll find that out when we get outside.
Meet me in front of the hive, Jensen.
Because it's a little... I can't tell, given the severity of this dude's crime, this feels like a sort of petulant revenge. But we'll see what happens.
Anyway.
What was it? I keep getting off track.
Just
the train of thought track.
Is whoever argues that.
Oh, I was gonna go. I think the only real answer to that question is you have to acknowledge that there's really isn't. You can't. If there's a necessary evil, then you can't call it evil, which basically means you have to take a sort of Zen-like approach to the whole concept of evil, which is that it doesn't really exist. Concept. Well, that's Taoist. Same root. Why does this keep freaking out on me? Same root philosophy, which is essentially there is no necessarily evil. There's just order versus chaos.
Right.
And inevitably there's that balance. So you go, does chaos? It's essentially the question: is chaos inherently evil? I suppose is the better way of formatting that exact same question, because essentially, if it can't, because this comes even to an Augustinian thing for if you're opposed to Eastern philosophy. Oh, hang on, she didn't do it. Oh, is she about to do it? Oh, I think we have to go up to where we can see it. She's gonna hack their LED display just to make a fool of the guy. And basically reveal his... Oh, I didn't realize she was going to actually meet us like this.
I was going to use it myself, but after everything you've done, I think you deserve it more.
So what do you...
anyways.
I have a few loose ends to tie up, and I need to make sure this autopsy report...
Oh, maybe she does that later. She hacks their thing and plasters the news all over it, so it basically discredits him. Anyways.
And the evidence from the autopsy.
Every dang time. Zen-like approach. Oh, and if you're opposed to that, it's not as mystical as it might sound to be like, oh, there is no evil, there is only whatever. It's like you could even take it to the Augustinian idea, which is that if it is truly necessary evil, then that implies that all of see, that's what she does. It implies that existence itself must therefore be evil if evil is necessary in it. And that would be, at the very least, a non-theological claim. So the only argument you could then make is that, well, then it must not... If it's inherent in the nature of reality, then it isn't an evil thing, because this is why I think there's more overlap than you'd think between the whole sort of Taoist versus Augustinian philosophies.
I mean, yeah. Because
he even makes the argument... Because it's essentially the age-old question of like, oh, why would God allow bad things? And it's essentially the idea that how can a good God create evil? And the answer is he didn't.
It just
there is no such thing as evil. There is only chaos in the sense of
the absence.
Chaos versus order, meaning order being that which aligns with the will of God, and chaos being that which goes against it.
Right. Because, and I always bring
and again this and even
developer or the creator.
C.S. Lewis makes a great quote that I will always bring up because it's excellent, where he says, "You will always serve the will of God,
one way or the other.
No matter what you do, but it makes a difference to you whether you serve like Judas or like John."
Right.
Because you're going, even what you would call chaos being, oh, it goes against the will of God. It's like, yeah, but that still ultimately serves the will of God.
Well, I told you about...
But it just makes it sucky for you. Woe to them through whom it comes.
The whole Silmarillion concept of like when Tolkien describes
what do you think is going on there?
Tolkien describes the cognitive... the dissonance even on a musical level with, that whole cosmology, I suppose, and that evil versus good and how that is integrated into the ultimate purpose for good anyway. So
yeah, I just think that's an excellent... I love that C.S. Lewis quote because not only is it true, I think it puts it in such a poignant way.
Sure.
But it's essentially that you're going, you can't really... You can call it chaos in that it would be, non-order, but that doesn't mean that it isn't serving the same function in a different way.
Yeah.
Thus, it can't be escaped, which is why I think that there's a lot more overlap. That would be the topic of the essay I'll write in like 20 years when I feel like I actually could qualify that statement better than what I just did.
Dangerous men must be permitted to...
be dangerous.
Yeah, I mean that.
Not willy nilly though.
I'm saying
that's also worse.
Mankind, if you want to say it that way.
Yes, there is an undeniable trend that it is usually the men who are the most capable of it, not universally, but on average.
Yeah.
And if you would like to deny that, hey, that's a weird thing to... Okay.
What?
It's a weird... Hey, I mean, yes, you're denying reality if you try to be like, oh, you can't make that kind of generality. But even then beyond that, it's like, is that really your bar?
Yeah.
For all the women who get mad about that, it's like, you really want to get a piece of the human... whatever you'd call the human tendency for cruelty and harm? Like, is that... You really want a piece of that?
Well, I mean, even within...
It's aiming a bit low.
Even within their feminism, there's a degree of hubris in that they go too far and say, we can do everything.
Ultimately, it's actually erasure because it basically says that the ideal woman is a man.
Yeah.
It's like, well, okay, so you just gave up on any of the other positive traits.
I, in fact, was
and instead just wanted to get in on the racket of being violent and aggressive and a bit sleazy.
Well, because they almost act like men can just do whatever the craps they want, and I'm like,
well, that was arguably based on the sort of the fact that there were few repercussions, which I think is true to an extent, but not to the extent
a lot of people.
Because people act like, oh, it was always fine in the past, and it's like, no, those men were still looked down upon. There were no actual consequences in that. Yes, they got away with it in that they weren't punished for it, but they were viewed lower. Yeah. It did affect their reputation, which is, I guess, something we don't seem to care about it these days. Right. A reputation means nothing.
But
I guess in that, if you view that context, then sure, I guess it doesn't have consequences. But that the world in which reputations mean nothing is already the flaw. That's the root of your problem.
There's gray areas for ladies in a different manner, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Obviously, men are capable of certainly great evils in that there's far more, I think, physicality to men. But at the same time, if you've ever crossed a woman on a emotional or psychological level, they will cut you down quicker than a newly grown sapling. It's like
I didn't think this guy was going to be here. I thought we were just investigating. Some friends of yours I met. Okay. Did we have to clarify that?
I got it now. You would say
I don't swing that way, pal.
Pull the plug.
I'm looking at maybe you did.
I don't.
I'm saying him. Saying, look at maybe you did have to clarify that. Yes.
I don't know. Anyways, basically, I don't know what the argument, what the conclusion would be here, because it feels a little bit bold to say, so that's why crime's okay, kids.
I'm not saying crime's okay.
People are always going to break the law, so you might as well help them break it safely.
It's gray areas have to exist in the broken, non-ideal society that we live in. I mean, it's like the whole idea of people going, we want peace, not war. It's like, yeah, but so does everyone. And yet, war happens because it just does.
Well, because what's the quote that says, men say they want peace, but few men want that which promotes peace?
Right.
I forget who said that, and I'm probably misquoting it. But it's essentially the idea of you can't say you want peace unless you want the things that engender peace.
Right.
Because a lot of times you just want to act however you want, but then you want peace. Because here's another topic, totally random, but since we're promoting violence, I think there's also a certain degree to which you also have to let
sneak in, snatch the card while he's otherwise.
This is going to require a bit of backing up, because people like to make the claims like, oh, humans were social creatures. It's like, yes, and you know what is a key characteristic of social animals?
Run along, sorry.
What we call bullying, which is really just socialization.
Well, yeah.
That is to say, the young and even the older who are teaching the young essentially will establish through not necessarily violence, but usually through aggression at the least.
Yeah.
What is and is not tolerated. So it's essentially the idea, it's like, yes, should you pick on the kid who has glasses because he has glasses? No, that's stupid. Should you pick on the kid who... Did I ever show you that really horrifying image of the... So it's a dude walking around some mall with his girlfriend, and she's wearing some weird dog collar on a leash that he's holding. Okay. And they're just walking around like this. And it's like, okay, no, this is like, these are the kinds of decisions that led you to think this was okay to do in public. You should have been made aware early on in your childhood that this would not be tolerated.
Right.
And if that meant you had to get bullied until you stopped this, I'm not sure I'm opposed to it. Because it's not... Again, it's like, if you're going to acknowledge that we're social animals, then we have to be permitted to address these kinds of things socially.
I don't know that I would call
not
it
everything,
bullying. I
wouldn't either, but that is what we called it. And the problem is because we classified everything as bullying.
I think, that's
the idea that now is because the problem we have is, and I think, again, social media makes it worse, is the fact that people act like you should just be able to do whatever you want. And
people can't say anything
no one
about
else
it.
can be opposed to it. It's like, because that's the fundamental problem, and then you introduce the kind of anonymity that social media brings you.
Right.
So now you can say the most hideous, vitriolic stuff to someone, and you just get away with it.
Right.
It's like back in the past, you had to A, have the guts to say it to their face, and B, be willing to get punched in the face afterwards, which was what would likely happen, and rightly so. Like, if you said half of the things you could say to people on Twitter, they would be totally justified in decking you on the spot. And the problem is, not only do we think that that shouldn't be, if it did happen in person, because the problem is that it doesn't, but even if it did, people would act like, well, you can't believe you went off the handle like that. It's like, no, this is what happens when you're an anus.
Yeah.
You act like an anus, you get dealt with like an anus. And that's the problem, is we can't be social creatures and then deny the way social creatures
I think it's important
sort these things out.
I think it's important, though, to
this dumb janitor is blocking this door that
the principle of bullying with, I suppose, social enforcing, I want to call it.
That's what it... Because some of it is unjustified, but not all of it.
Because, like, being a bully, it, to me, is defined differently in my head in what you are accomplishing. It's kind of psychological torture or pressure or whatever else, but not in response to... And it's often arbitrary. Right, and it's also not... it's not something that is getting...
it's not enforcing provoked. Accepted behavior.
Right, but it's not like, okay, you're provoking me and now I'm, bullying you, quote unquote. It's more like, okay, you're randomly coming up to somebody simply because they're low on the food chain and basically establishing... Well, and that's why the quintessential argument is usually that bullies are often... They go for those people. True bullies in the sense that those who actually predate on those kinds of people, it's like that's because they're the only people they can exercise any kind of power over because they themselves are low on the food chain. Right.
So they have to pick on people lower. Whereas if you're just a person who's like, yeah, no, we're not going to tolerate this kind of behavior, so cut it out or you'll be ostracized at the best.
Right. That to me is like, okay, no, that's not
just
bullying.
Yeah, that's just socialization.
Yeah, that's not bullying. That's just you getting yourself into a predicament where you expected people to look the other way with your behavior or condone it. Therefore, it's this principle that we have now in our culture that says if I don't actually agree with you or affirm you in some way, then I'm actually bullying.
Well, and I think the ultimate problem is you can't claim, oh, you need to let people do this because they have the freedom to do it. It's like, yeah, and I have the freedom to sock you for it. Because you can't get one without the other. Now you might argue, oh, but that would just lead to, that's giving too much leniency because then people could abuse that. And it's like, that's true. But I think there's a certain degree to where... I think it has a large part due, to the fact that we try to decriminalize everything. Or rather, well, not in the sense of decriminalize and make it non-criminal, but rather to try and remove the concept of crime from society. And so we say, oh, we're gonna make a bunch of these things against the law. So now, if someone says something heinous to you in the street and you deck them for it, they could legally sue you.
Right. When
in the past, it was like, if anyone saw it and went, yeah, he said this to that guy, and then that guy punched him, most of the people would be like, yeah, fair's fair. Yeah. That was a pretty awful thing.
Yeah.
And that was just where you'd leave it. The fact that we actually have laws that go, oh, you can't do that, and it's like, well, I think that's a slightly different issue because that gets into the concept of the hyper legalization of everything. Again, I don't mean as in making it legal. I mean having too many laws.
Sure. Well, and I think that comes back to the whole idea that less restriction is better because.
Well, because that's, again, as I've said, I've been reading Thomas Paine. I guess we got a little bit of time. I may as well give a preliminary.
We've talked about Thomas before.
Well, but I'm going to talk about this specifically. The rights of man is actually not quite all it's cracked up to be yet. I'm not done with it. But I'll admit, I'm a bit...
I don't think that's the one I read. I can't remember which one it was. It was one of the pamphlets.
You probably read Common Sense. That's the most famous one. But, because the rights of man, the problem I have with it is that the first half of it, literal the first part of 2 parts, is all... It's another 3. I'm going to have to hack another thing forever. I should save just to be safe. The first half of it, literally, is a defense of the French Revolution, because it's in response to criticisms... Careful of the... It's response to criticisms that were levied by I think it was Edmund Burke, or Burke is another famous political philosopher. I forget his first name. Who basically criticized, why does that keep happening? We used the wired controller to prevent that, and then it still happens. So it's basically a defense of the French Revolution, but it was written before the French Revolution turned south. So I can't help but read it going, wow, some of this does not hold up.
Well, it's just that didn't age
Plus,
well.
yeah, and then plus I don't know. The French Revolution, I agree with most of the political pundits who say it was flawed conceptually. It wasn't just that, it got carried away and they went too far with the I guess retribution or whatever you'd say that they enacted on the this is not going to happen. That's way too slow. Darn it. So I think fundamentally it had certain flaws because of the fact that it didn't outline. I mean, all you have to do is look at the American Constitution versus the French to see the values that don't quite align. But anyways, I'm not getting into that. The point is, that's why the first half really has had me bogged down. Because it's like, I'm not all that sympathetic towards the French Revolution, and this doesn't hold up very well historically, so I can't help but feel like it's just a little unfortunate. But finally we're getting...
It certainly gives you some historic perspective.
Yeah, but again, that was never something I was jonesing for. But that's not going to happen either. Come on. Well, okay, maybe... This is so stupid. The second half has been more of the actual, here's the fundamental philosophical ideas that underpin proper government. And I don't know why it wasn't taught in school. I didn't have to read it in school. Yeah.
Civics.
Still should be, if we're honest, because there's things where I just go, okay. So, that tyrannical government he's describing, that's kind of what we have. Because he's, obviously, you could almost call it hyper-libertarian, but then again, you just go, well, if that's how it started, maybe leaving that was where we went off track.
Exactly.
So, I'd be,
Well, and the
all
point
in favor of the idea that if someone says something like that, you
this
should just be able to stop them.
This current political system
and
is
the idea
no
that
one's
that's a
friend.
law.
Like, people act like, I think...
That's a bastardization on all sides.
Right, that's what I mean. Like, I was reading an article the other day. It was talking about the whole women's... not only women's rights, but primarily feminism, and how now on either side of the aisle they're screwed. And it's basically because on the conservative side, it's like, traditional traditional gender roles and that kind of thing are something we affirm, and we're not gonna. But then I don't
want to have to unsave because
on the left you have somebody going, well, we don't even know what a woman is, so how can we make that valuable?
Well, that's ultimately where the Tolkien idea that evil just eats itself is the right.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Just go, yep. I feel bad.
That was a shot. That was a crack shot,
man. The problem is I feel bad. I don't feel... he was a security guard. I thought he was a criminal. I feel even worse. His legs.
He has a home to go, a family to go home to.
His legs are doing something funny. This is China. He ain't got a family.
Wow.
There aren't enough women. Hey, that's a political truth. That is actually a sociological thing in China right now. It's actually, yeah, it's almost like you wonder how that would happen. Turns out, women are necessary for the promulgation of families. Oh crap, there's more.
Don't worry, somebody will just become a woman and everything will be solved.
What?
I'm joking. I was saying, don't worry, somebody will just become a woman and then everything will be solved.
Well,
you're just
I shouldn't be doing this.
Sizzly.
Edgar Lee, he has a name. Okay.
And a face, too.
I don't want to do this, but kind of feel like I have to.
They're all going to meet Katya in video gaming heaven.
Is that what we're calling it now? Here's the problem. I don't remember which one of these is which. This is the most recent.
The bosom of Halo Land.
That was too far of an analogy to take it. Those were uncomfortable terms. I'm going to reload as much as I'm sad because that was a nasty terminal to hack, but anyways.
It's nasty.
What was I saying though? Was I off on a weird tangent or did I just finish the weird tangent?
You were about to talk about Arcane.
I'm sure I was. We never addressed that. Part of the reason Soko's cool is the mobster aspect. I'm just going to say it. Before I liked him as a compelling character, he was the awesome character. Why do we always like villains? It's the same kind of thing, but there's something about mobster villains especially. Is it the fact that they seem more attainable, I guess? It's not like, oh, he's, some super villain who's got this. It's like, no, this is just a dude who knows how to get stuff done. I don't know.
I think there's a bit of a...
Do I just have a criminal mastermind deep within me I don't want to recognize, or is this everyone?
No, I think this is true for me at least, too. And
so we can both be criminal masterminds together.
There's a certain point in which I think it's Jack Sparrow that describes it in the second Pirates movie where he says... Or no, it's the third, I'm sorry, where he says, just talking to Elizabeth, and he talks about there's going to come a time when you want to make a decision that you want to make simply because you want to. And it's like, that's very much what the sentiment
is. Yeah, but doesn't that
these...
become a power fantasy, though? The idea that's like, oh, no one can stop me because...
That part certainly is, yes. That part certainly is. As far as just doing something simply because you can. And it's like, well, okay. But
so, there's people in the glass...
I think that goes to show you how often we can't, I suppose.
Well, I think
there's this principle that men can get away with anything or whatever. It's like
it's,
specifically white men. It's like, no, we really can't.
Not really, no. Well, and I think maybe that's the element of because the Peaky Blinders thing has the same kind of vibe we were talking about in that one. I forget how many episodes it was ago now, but it was one when we talked about Arcane. If that helps narrow it down. The whole concept of the sort of hyper-individualist undercity society where it's like you actually would finally have the freedoms to do most stuff.
If you just had the brass, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not even that you would inherently become a vile person, but simply that you would actually be free to just do what you wanted, and you could choose not to. Wasn't that the one where we had the whole agency shirt? Agency, mother! Do you have it?
Personal agent.
Why does this keep happening? It's very annoying. I want that on a shirt. I just want a black and white Jules' face. It just says agency. Do you have it? Because that's on a shirt. You can get those where it actually says the English, do you speak it? But I think that would be a funnier thing. Because it's that. We're just going, in this kind of society, it's like, yes, there's laws and stuff, but for the most part, you could do whatever you wanted. Because there wasn't an unnecessary preponderance of laws.
Well, and there's never
Do I need to be here? It says I'm standing right where I need to be.
Way of...
I need to pick that up?
On a numerical level, of having enough laws
I did!
That we can undo stupidity.
Well, exactly, and that's our problem is that we keep trying, which means essentially all that does is you hyper-restrict those who are decent, or more accurately, the cowards who are not willing to break the laws. Because the idea that, I would never rob someone because it's like, no, you just don't want to get caught. if you had the assurance that you could get away with it, a lot more people would be breaking the law.
Sure.
Because it's not, the law is the only thing that's stopping them. It's not any kind of inherent moral decency.
Right.
So I guess that was easy. I guess he's just going to watch her wash his hands, or wash her hands.
While staring at her pockets.
You're going to keep harping on the pocket thing? It's natural, I assure you.